whether the people think that this council's in the news a lot or whatever the case is, but this council does a lot of things that I think are also good. And I think the fact that we were willing and didn't put a limit on public comment was a good thing.
All right, Councilman Everett Roy, thank you for joining me in the den.
I'm glad to be here.
It's good to have you. I know it's been a busy week for a lot of us. My editor and producer was in training. He's a police officer. So we're scheduling this on a Friday night, which is great because we have the weekend ahead of us. How was your week?
Busy, but was a good week. This will be the first week that we're off council. We're not going back until June 2nd. So a little bit of a break.
Good.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that, but I know you from BNI. We are BNI Associates, which is Business Network International. And how long have you been part of that group? You just recently came on board, didn't you?
Yes, probably with maybe 2 months.
Okay, good. You mind pulling this a little closer to you, just making sure that that audio is good? You want to test it real quick?
Yes.
All right, great. So I know you from there, but I also remember when my daughter was playing basketball at Calallen, they used to play videos on the screen and your name used to pop up. You were like a sponsor of something for the Calallen Wildcats basketball team.
Yes. I have I have a company called Gulf Coast Capital Lending.
Okay.
And so I sponsored the basketball team and the volleyball team. Yes.
So you're responsible for their success.
I wouldn't go that far. I don't think I'm,
They're doing great, aren't they? The girls over there?
Yeah. Tonight, actually, the Calallen baseball team is playing. The ladies softball lost last night, but the boys are playing right now at Cabinets.
Okay, great. So you are a councilman. I want to talk about that just a little bit, or a lot, because there's a lot of issues going on in the city of Corpus Christi. And right now, how hard is it to be a council member for the city of Corpus Christi?
The job's always been hard. I mean, we spend a lot of time. I spend on average about 20 to 30 hours a week just working as a council member. Probably read about 800 to 1,000 pages a week preparing for council. But, there's a lot of issues going on. Water is one. It's a big issue.
Right.
And, we're working on that. And this council is a different council. I've been on council since I started in 2017. And so each council's a little different. This one's different. So just trying to make sure that you can work with everyone and collaborate and maintain your professionalism and all those good things.
How long have you been in as a city councilman?
Well, I came on in 2017. I was appointed, then I got reelected, and I served a term. I came off, actually. Unfortunately, I had some health issues that I had to take care of, and then I came back on. I've been back on for 4 years.
Okay. What were the health issues? I don't know if you're okay with sharing that.
No. I'm very fortunate that a lot of people deal with having cancer, and I was able to have cancer, and right now it's been maybe 3 years in remission. So they say I've got to go maybe 6 years before they can actually say I'm cancer-free.
Okay. What kind of treatment did you get?
Well, I had radiation treatment and you have to just deal with it. It was a long time because they did low doses for over, I think, 6 months.
So how do you feel about that, going through that process of treatment for cancer? Did you learn anything you would have done differently or anything like that?
No, not really. I just had to put my faith in God and to get through it and just pray and continue to go about living,
Yes, sir.
And mainly, but it does put a perspective on things.
Mm-hmm. Like what? What kind of perspective do you mean?
Well, number one of the things that makes you think about is that you're not Superman. that
Right.
there's always things happen, and you're not, um, and at the end, the end result could be you could not be with your family, or you miss the ones that you're around, or you're sick. There's a lot of things that go through your head.
Yeah, that's a perspective that starts getting sharpened in you as you grow older too. I mean, the older I get, the more I recognize all those things, and I become more aware
Yeah,
of the brevity of life. I mean, it's so brief. When we're young, we think it'll be here forever,
yeah,
eternally. But as we grow older, we realize how short it is.
yeah. Time flies. It's amazing. I mean, if somebody were to say that, I'll be 64 in a couple months, and where'd the time go?
It flies, don't it?
It does.
Do you have something that you measure your time or how much you have left by?
I don't really worry about it.
No?
I really don't. I think that if you have the perspective that uh, there's something greater after
Mm-hmm.
being on this earth,
Yeah.
then I don't think you worry about it. I don't sit there. Of course, like again, I enjoy being with my family and my friends and that.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, what if something happens, it happens.
Yes, sir. I mean it like there's a scripture that says, "Teach me to number my days." It's a prayer. I believe it's one of the psalmists, maybe David, that says, "Teach me to number my days." Maybe to be aware of how brief it is, and to make sure none of it is wasted. Do you feel like maybe before this, the cancer or what have you, before this, perspective change, maybe there was a little waste. Maybe you didn't realize how brief it was, or anything like that happened.
No, not really.
No.
I can't say that. I pretty much have always lived life with a purpose, and um, and so I think that it was I was aware of it. I tackled it and said, well, okay, what do you have to do? You have to put your faith in the physicians that, are talking. We had some options, and you just try to make the best decision and go on.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah. But, you know, being an Army nurse, I was a nurse in the military.
All right.
I worked oncology floor. So it wasn't like from a medical standpoint, I didn't have an understanding of kind of what was going on. And so I think that was an advantage. And
Mhm.
I worked in the ICU when I was in the Army. I worked in a surgical intensive care unit for a while. And I've worked here. I worked here in San Antonio as a nurse. So I had kind of a dual career. I was working when I got out of the military. I still worked at nursing, but I have a degree. My degree's in business finance, and so I worked in that field also. So
Awesome. A medical field.
yeah,
And you're a business owner, medical field business owner. The reason I say it's because sometimes people experience something that kind of uh, wakens them up to the reality of what's meaningful in life, uh, what's more important. Sometimes we put a lot of importance on things that don't even matter. You know what I mean?
right,
And so there's some life experiences that will humble you, and sometimes redirect your perspectives and your priorities to say, "Hey, this is more important." You know what I
right.
mean? And you mentioned purpose. Did that help? Did that help fine tune your purpose, or were you pretty clear on what your purpose was before that?
Without going into a lot of detail, because I don't know how much time we have, but I've had a pretty unique life. I lost my mother to cancer at the age of 11, and my father passed away 3 months later. So basically, at that point in time, there was a big unknown, and it was that particular point in time when I was at the grave site that I basically said, I said, God, it's just me and you now. So I'm going to put my faith in you, and you're going to get me through life. And so when it comes, there's been a lot of ups and downs. I think people have ups and downs. Um, there's a lot of challenges. There's victories, and there's setbacks. And, but I think overall, I've kept my eye on the prize, if you want to call it that. And
Yes.
so basically, I've just take one day at a time.
Yes, sir. So what would you say your purpose is? Now, there's a scripture that says that there's a God-given task with which man must be occupied with. Um, what would you say that is yours? What has God given you to do in this life?
So early on, one of the things that that God inspired me to do is to be a servant leader. Here I was at in my 20s at Triple Army Medical Center in Hawaii, and instead of running around and doing a lot of things, because Hawaii is an exciting place, it's got a great nightlife and things of that nature. I was giving my time. I was on the board of Easter Seals. I was involved in Easter Seals, which was an organization that basically everything we raised for the children stayed on the island, which was very important. And so I found that was very and it was enjoyable for me. And so I've been involved in a lot of community boards and events throughout my entire life. I've given a lot to the community, and I really didn't understand why that is until I went to Leadership Corpus Christi, and we talked a lot about servant leadership and what it means, and how that drives individuals. And so, even that was what led me to get on to city councils. I was on a lot of boards. I did a lot of things. I was the president of the football booster club in Calallen. I was a basketball booster club president for a while, and I was the president of the Northwest Business Association, and I just kept doing these things within the community. And then ultimately, I became a council member.
Mm-hmm. So leadership is in your blood.
I would say that, being a combat veteran, I think that when you're faced, combat was probably one of the biggest challenges of my life. And being able to be a leader in that situation, that helped me get through it, but those are, again, that's a challenge.
How long do you feel like you've been a student of leadership? I was like 21, and I got introduced to leadership and books from like John Maxwell, and for whatever reason, man, that just sparked my interest, and it became a passion of mine. And I became a student of leadership. I'd read books, I'd go to leadership seminars, that kind of stuff. How long have you been kind of pursuing that?
I would say that I probably, when I was in undergraduate school, in terms of leadership, we talk about business and what makes you a successful business person, or being able to have a successful company. And so I was always interested in, like, for example, back then when I was in college, it was the Harvard business model that we studied. And then we studied the Japanese business model, and we studied all these different things that in terms of people's success. But at the same time, what intrigued me is that we also studied people's failures. When you talk about junk bonds and Mike Milken and all the things that happened early in the 80s that changed a lot of regulations today in terms of how the stock market's traded, how things happen. Those were things that we learned, insider trading and all that kind of stuff, and what happens when you have junk bonds and what it can do. And I've continued to study, even in my field, 2006, 2008, when the mortgage industry imploded, really understanding what was happening. I was one of the people that said this is going to happen because the pendulum had swung too far to one side. And I knew that it was just a matter of time before it swings back.
How genuine, I guess, or legitimate, I would say, is like the stock market? Because I always thought, I don't know too much about it, but I always thought that the stock market was driven by the value of a company. And that just doesn't seem like is the case. Something happens in the world, and people get emotional, and it seems like an emotional machine. Like it just goes up and down, and it doesn't seem to rise and fall on the value of a company. So it almost seems like it's an algorithm that kind of moves that around. Do you know what I'm talking about, or am I way off?
Well, one of the things that we have to understand is that what we place value on changes. It's fluid.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about the stock market, if somebody has an experience, and I'll give a good example, probably one of the biggest things that I missed in my life is that when Martha Stewart was convicted and went to jail, I was watching that on the news, and at that particular point in time, I should have invested whatever,
On what?
on Martha Stewart and her
Okay.
stock, right? Because it plummeted.
Oh, okay.
It went down really fast. But Martha Stewart was one of the few individuals that was able to turn it around and be very successful after her issue or whatever she went through.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, that's a good example. Her stock went down. She went, spent her time, came back, and went back to business and grew her company back again. So those people that invested early on or bought those stock or those shares, they did really well. And that's an example, and that's how business is. There is a life cycle to it.
Mm-hmm.
It is not static. You can't plot it on a graph and say that it's going to start from one point and constantly rise, in a straight line, because it doesn't happen that way.
I saw a little meme. It was like a little video with this guy sitting on the floor up against the garage door, like in a New York City street. And the garage door is open about this much. And he drops his drink or something. It rolls underneath the garage door, and it rolls back out and it's 2 drinks, right? He stumbles and his sandwich goes in and it comes out. It's like 2 sandwiches, and things keep falling into the place, and they keep getting multiplied when they come out. So at some point he puts everything underneath that garage door, and once he does that, it just closes. It's like, I don't know if they were saying that that's what it's like to trade in cryptocurrency or just the stock market, but that's why I feel like you go in when it's low and you sell when it's high. That's supposed to be the norm, but it seems like when you sell when it's low, it just keeps dropping. You know what I mean? And it doesn't have, but when you don't when you don't buy when it's low, it'll shoot back up. It almost seems as if it knows what you're going to do. But I'm like, maybe it knows what I'm going to do, but how does it know what everybody's going to do? Because it's based on what a lot of people are doing and how they're investing. But have you noticed anything like that, or what's your take on that? That's what I mean. Like, it seems like it's an algorithm.
When you invest in anything, whether it be the stock market, whether you go out and you buy real estate, property, it's all a risk.
Right.
It's a risk. You have to be able to understand your risk, and you have to watch your investments. Mm-hmm. And there's different philosophies on that. I mean, it just depends on what you're looking at doing. If you're trying to have rapid growth, you're going to take more risk. If you're looking at moderate growth, then you're going to take moderate risk. And so if you're somebody like me who is basically looking at retiring, then I take even less risk.
Right.
Because what I'm looking at is just being able to have a stable future when I retire.
Right.
So yeah, you have to calculate those risks. I'm not a gambler. I've never went to Vegas and gambled. I've never done anything like that. I met a guy on the golf course the other day, and he's a professional poker player and dealer. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't even relate because I've never even played poker.
Right.
But that's just me.
Right.
I
wouldn't be good at it because I'm a risk taker. Even when I don't have a good hand, I'm like, yeah, I'm all in. And it doesn't go well. You have to be very calculated and very disciplined when it comes to that. I learned a long time ago, don't invest anything that you're not willing to lose. You have to be smart about it, and you got to go into it with your eyes open. So there's some safe stuff that I do, but then, I played around with some cryptocurrency that I think if I had been disciplined and gotten out when I should have, then I would have made some decent cash. But you think it's going to keep going and you don't sell, but business and invest in the stock market, that's two totally different things. And you seem to be a successful businessman. How long have you been in business? What's your business? And
I've been in business since the age of 13. I had one of the largest paper routes in Cleveland, Ohio area. Yeah, that's where I'm from
yeah.
originally. But I've always been an entrepreneur. I mean, I remember even before that, I used to shine shoes, all in the neighborhood to anybody to make a little money, and so, but I've worked for corporations and I've owned my own company. I have, and so I owned a company, a mortgage company that we operated in Pittsburgh, San Antonio, and Orlando, Florida. And I had that for about 10 years. And when the crash happened, I basically shut that company down. So since then, I've worked for some major banks and organizations. And recently, I made the decision about a year and a half ago to start another company up. So I've had this company about a year and a half, and I still do commercial banking with Value Bank of Texas. So you pretty much have to have a bank in order to be able to do commercial lending. You can broker it out, but it doesn't. Most of the time, it's not as successful.
Mm-hmm. How easy would you say it is to start up a company?
I don't think it's ever easy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's because there's things that you think that you try to do your best to anticipate, but it doesn't always go the way you think. And so you have to be, you have to be fluid. You have to understand and admit when things aren't working and try something different. I think one of the biggest things that I see when I see businesses that have failed is because they weren't willing to change or adapt. And so you have to be able to adapt. I'll give you a good example. I've got some really bright people that work for me at Gulf Coast Capital Lending. And one of the young ladies that I hired came in and said, I was using a platform that we had used for years, an origination platform. I've used it for 20 years. And she says, there's a better deal out there. There's a better program that will help us be better organized, follow up with our customers better. And so I said, if that's the case, investigate it, look into it. I put another, one of my managers on it also, and they convinced me. We went and we moved over to that particular origination platform, and it's been wonderful. So you have to be able to listen to people, and that's part of what I do on City Council also. When I ran, I ran on a family man, a veteran who listens. And so you have to be able to listen to your employees. And sometimes they are right. And a lot of times my goal is to make sure that they know more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to stifle people in terms of seeing them grow. I want them to grow to be able to take over or do the things that I do.
Right.
Then I know I'm successful.
Right.
If you're constantly trying to hold people back, that's an issue.
Right. It's insecurity type of issue that limits you because you hinder the people that God's placed in your life to be able to help take you to the next level. If you help them increase, then by default, they're helping you increase. And have you had people in your group that you've seen grow, and because of that, your business has grown, or you have grown as an individual personally?
Definitely. That's the goal.
Yeah.
That is the goal. You want to see people grow. I want everybody to be successful, however they define that, whether it's money, position, education, whatever. I want everybody to grow. That's part of my organization because I know that that's going to help us be stable.
Mm-hmm. As a leader, I think that's our goal. As a pastor, I try to identify giftings and abilities, and then I try to give them wings so they can expand and grow in that area. Doesn't always happen that way because as a leader, I think that you see potential in people that they don't see in themselves sometimes.
Yes, that's true. But I think, unfortunately, there's also times that you got to cut people loose. And that's just the way it is. You can sit there and do everything you can, but unfortunately, if they don't believe in themselves and if they don't do the things that they need to do, and one of the things is you got to have trust
Hmm.
And if you can't trust someone, you can't trust the individual, then like I said, sometimes at the end of the day, you have to cut that individual loose.
Yeah, that's tough because there is potential. I had somebody some time back. I was part of a multi-level marketing business, and one of the owners had a saying. He said, "Potential just means ain't worth a darn yet." You have potential, but right now, currently, you ain't worth a darn. And there's a lot of people that have potential, but they're doing absolutely nothing with it. They don't lend themselves to be taught or to be trained or molded. It's like what you were saying earlier. I think one of the biggest qualities of someone aspiring to be a leader is teachability. And I think that's one of the qualities necessary for success also. You have to be teachable. You have to be available to be molded. Like you said, here's a new program that'll make you better. Well, no, we've always done it this way, and you remain stagnant. So is it hard for you to open the door for things like that and for change and to learn and to grow?
Actually, I think it gets easier the older you are. I think even as a parent, when I look at the fact that, I have 4 children, and unfortunately, my son that I raised, and I was a single parent for a while, but when I raised him, I think, boy, he got the short end of the stick because there were a lot of days I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean? There's a lot of days that the military, because of the mission and the things that you're involved in, and the way that you are trained and taught in the military, sometimes that's not the way you need to be able to address and interact with your children. You know what I mean? They're not soldiers.
Mm-mm.
And so when I was used to pushing soldiers and getting them to do the things I wanted them to do, I needed to take a different approach with my son. And so I had to learn that. Now, when I look at my youngest, she will be in next week, she'll be a senior. I've had to do things different. And I'm understand that. I'm more compassionate about things. She is my baby girl.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I know that I'm a better parent. I'm a better parent. I'm a better husband than I was when I first was married 35 years ago. You know,
Yeah. What's changed?
there's a lot of things I think I can do, but I can't. You know what I mean? You can't do it. I mean, is even from a physical standpoint, there's just things that my wife and I, one of the things we loved to do when we first met is that we would go run 8 to 10 miles.
Mm.
We'd go run and then we'd run in the morning, run in the afternoon, run at night. And so now my wife and I, we walk about 4 to 5 miles a day.
Wow,
We
still
walk.
pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we walk. That's the time that we can fellowship. We can talk to each other. I don't have to worry about my daughter or somebody, eavesdropping, and
Mhm.
and it's our time.
Yeah.
And so that's worked out for us. We've been doing that since we got married.
Yeah. You guys have always been tight, or did y'all ever go through like a rough patch or anything like that?
I think there's always, again, life has ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I think everybody, I don't know about a rough patch, but I know that there's times that we don't agree on things and there's conflict. And it's the same thing on city council.
Mm-hmm.
Right now there's a lot of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And those people that know me, they understand how I deal with that conflict in terms of my approach and remaining professional and being able to keep an even keel. And but not everybody does that,
Mm.
And so but yeah, there's always a rough patch.
Yeah. So what would you say? And the reason I asked that is because I used to watch a show. You probably remember it, maybe Duck Dynasty. You remember that with
Yes. Yeah.
and there was a gentleman. He was the dad of the whole group, right? It was Mr. Phil, and Miss Kay. And when we were watching the show, obviously they don't go into too much background, but everybody would be talking about how awesome their marriage was. Like, I want a relationship like Phil and Miss Kay, and on and on. And then there was an episode it was a new season, and the first episode of that new season, they were going to have a wedding because they never had a wedding. So they're up there and they're giving their vows. And Miss Kay, the mom, says, I loved you when you were not so nice, and now you're very nice, and this and that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Phil's always been nice. Well, then when you hear about their history, they had some rough moments. Like he left her and he was on drugs and drunk and all that kind of stuff. And then he came back and he found Christ, came back, and they reestablished and restored the relationship. And I thought it was a beautiful thing because a lot of people, they go through the rough patch and they throw in the towel, right? They surrender, they give up, and they quit. They want what Phil and Kay had at the end of towards the end of their life. But in order for you to have that, a lot of times you have to be able to make it through the trenches, make it through the rough patches of life, which is what makes the latter or the later years more sweeter and more pleasant and more prosperous, I guess. But there's a lot of quitting in the trenches when people are in the trenches. And I think it happens more and more now, right?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, part of it is the fact that when you love somebody, that emotional high that you have in the beginning, as you know, it doesn't stay forever. There's different, again, almost like we were talking about in business, there's different phases or life cycles that you go through that will change you in terms of how you see each other, whether you become each other's, maybe you were always best friends, maybe you weren't, maybe you're now best friends, but you have to do more and you have to have more in terms of looking at your relationship than just some of the superficial things. When you're having kids, raising kids is tough. They don't always do the things that you think they're going to do, and they don't always agree. And so again, how you handle that conflict. And, one of the things that we decided is that we're not going to let our children get in the way of our relationship.
Right.
And so I think that's helped too.
And that's a great stance. A lot of people say, no, the kids come first. And I think that's a great misconception because they have to be able to see mom and dad be a team and stick together. That's healthy for them. But when the parents are always going against each other and side with the kids, it's not healthy for them because they take that into their relationships as well.
Right. And again, I think that's something that you learn. I don't think, I think that's definitely something that you learn. I don't think early on people understand that. And so, yeah.
So you have leadership background, you have military, so there's a lot of discipline there. You have business background, which I think is crucial and necessary for anybody that is any kind of position of government. And a lot of times that's not the case. People get into government positions having no experience building a company or a business, no experience leading anyone, but they got popular. Somehow they got voted in. And I think that's a travesty for the people that they represent because they should have some kind of background in that area. Right now in the city council, I don't know that the city council has ever been in the limelight as much as it has been here recently. Is that the case, or am I just seeing it differently?
Well, the way I'll answer that question is that their city council is in the limelight now. I don't recall a time in the past that maybe city council has been in the limelight this much, but I do believe that part of it is because where we're at as a country. When you look at social media, TikTok, all the different things that are out there, it changes the way that we see things and that we communicate. Because unfortunately, a lot of people will sit there and on social media look at an article in the Chronica, and I'll use that as an example, and they'll take that article and they'll say, okay, that must be true. That must be the gospel. And
Mhm.
so they'll go down that road and they read it or they read some other article or a comment from somebody that may not be well informed,
Mhm.
and then they pass it on and they share it and all those things. And that's a lot of what's happening right now. Uh, you know, and then the other thing is, and I don't, when you take a look at where our country's at from the top down, how we treat each other, the things that we say, the things that we do, and this negativity, especially like we sit there for 4 hours in front of public comment,
Mhm.
and you have the same people that will come up there and are very disrespectful,
Mhm.
and they say a lot of different things, and a lot of it's not true.
Yeah.
But because they're there day in and day out with the same mantra, people say, "Oh, that must be true. That
Mhm.
must be the way it is."
Mhm.
And so, and then when you're trying to get elected, then you start worrying about, okay, well, are they making a difference because they're saying those things, they're saying them in public. So then, depending on the individual, they may start following and worrying about the things that they're saying, and they could affect their vote.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of dynamics that go into that. But that's a tough thing.
Mhm.
And you can look at that now. You can look at that on the national level, you look at it on the state level, and you look at it on the local level. It goes, without saying.
Yeah, it's harsh right now. The That climate is hot. I went to go vote today, and I was already in my booth, and there's a gentleman, an older gentleman, just giving his ID, and he starts talking to the ladies there, and they're not really responding too much to him, but he's like, "No, ese mugroso de de Trump," and he just starts dogging on Trump, which that's fine. Everybody has the right to voice their opinion. And they were very professional about it. They didn't respond, and they just said, like, "Pues cada quien lo de ellos," right? Like everybody has the right to do. But he starts saying, "Ojalá que lo maten. Ojalá que lo maten. I hope they kill him. I hope they kill him." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." This is an older gentleman that, back from when respect was a thing, and it just blew my mind because he was criticizing a person for whatever reason, but then saying, "I hope they kill him." Like, to me, it's like, what do you mean? Like, I don't think I've ever despised anybody to the point where I said, "I hope they kill him." I don't care what they had done. And it was just hard to listen to. I almost said something, but he stopped and he went to his booth. But the ladies were very professional there. They didn't engage it. They just let him talk, and I was pleased with that. But it just hit me wrong. It's like, wow, where have we come to that people feel free to speak in that manner and have that kind of a mindset.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I see a lot of people going to the public comment sections of the city council meetings. Is there a time that is given to the public comment section? I know everybody gets like 3 minutes, but as a whole, is there
No.
a time? So you could be there all night
We've been there 4 hours.
just on
We've been
public
there
comment.
just on public comment 5 hours.
Oh
We've been
my
there
goodness.
an hour. We made a decision to not limit the time. Some cities, some councils, whether they be county or local, they will actually take the number of people. So let's say that 80 people sign up. They'll take 80 people and they'll divide it by, let's say that the max that they're going to go is 2 hours. They'll take the 80 people divided by the 2 hours, and that's what everybody gets. And
Yeah.
so they're not going to spend more than 2 hours. There's a lot, whether the people think that this council's in the news a lot or whatever the case is, but this council does a lot of things that I think are also good. And I think the fact that we were willing and didn't put a limit on public comment was a good thing. The other thing we did, which I think is a good thing also, is that we gave equal time for people in Portland and the surrounding community. Because guess what? We provide water to Portland. We provide water to Robstown. We do all the different things in this area as the pretty much when it comes to providing water or the assistance that we give with our neighbors trying to be good stewards there. And we weren't letting them speak. So if they had an issue like a couple months ago, Robstown was going through this thing where people were looking at a possibility of an ammonia plant.
Mm-hmm.
Very tough topic. It was right on the border of Cal Allen.
Mm-hmm.
This company was going to buy this farmland
Mm-hmm.
and put an ammonia plant there. And so that was a big issue. But when those people came to public comment, they were only allowed a minute because they weren't within the city limits. Now we've changed that, let everybody have 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the farmers and ranchers that are out in the Blunzer area that are concerned about the wells that are being dug, they used to only get up there for a minute, and you can't say much in a minute. So now they get 3 minutes like everybody else. Those are good things. I think there are some good things that have happened on this council too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was for that ammonia plant. I know there was a lot of opposition to it, and I just think Robstown is so dry of industry. There's nothing really for people to get work in, and there's a desperation of people here. There's not a lot of hope because they don't have a lot of opportunity. And I thought that would have been a great opportunity. And if they had played it right to where there was some negotiation on training the people here and kids being able to go into some kind of work right after high school, but they just dogged it and shut it down, and like nobody wanted to talk. And I went to like some town halls. They wouldn't let the company speak. They would just shout them down. They didn't let them respond or anything. And I'm like, come on. Like a lot of the people weren't even from Robstown.
Right.
The majority were not from Robstown.
And that's that culture that we talked about. That's that new culture that's the way it is. And it's unfortunate.
Shout them down. And if you don't agree with them, don't let them speak. It's like, we let you speak. You should let everybody speak. And that's what I love about the podcast. I invite anybody and everybody and let everybody have their say. And whether I agree with them or not, we have a conversation about it. And I think that's the way things should be handled. And I listen. I think maybe one of the unfortunate parts of the public comment is that you guys don't get to respond. You just got to sit there and listen. Y'all are not allowed to respond, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. We can do a statement of fact, but we can't respond directly to the individual. And so... and that's from a state. Most states adopt that practice, but that's really all the way at the state level. Yeah. I mean, if we do that, you can get you can be brought up on ethics.
Right, and I know it's protocol, but a lot of people get so nasty when they go up there to that microphone. How do you guys deal with that?
You develop a tough skin. Unfortunately, as a council member, I've had my family threatened, my life threatened. I've had a lot of people say some really ugly things.
Wow. And
so you just have to be able to, get through that. And sometimes we're human. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes I've seen people get upset. I had a situation, when we were not in the new chambers that we're in right now, the ones that were modeled, we were meeting over at the RTA, and I had a young man from Cal Allen that knew my son and said some really ugly and mean things to my son about my son because he wants to protect the environment. I mean, my son has nothing to do with this individual.
Right.
My son doesn't even know this person, but he knew my son from school and said some very mean things out in public, thinking, okay, I'm going to hurt you. And very proud of himself. And I called him back. He was walking out. I said, you come back here, young man, you come back here. Let me tell you something. And so at that particular point in time, I chose that I'm going to have a conversation with him. And if he wants to bring me up on charges, bring me up on charges. I'd be more than glad to stand there and take those. But he had to understand that, look, you don't do that. This isn't something that you do. I have a family. You leave my family out of it. And so, but there's people that they have no boundaries.
Right. None at all. And they'll criticize you for being unethical and all that when they have absolutely no boundaries. How do you guys get anything done with so much public comment time?
Well, we spend a lot of time. Sometimes I'm there from 9 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. We just spend a lot of time. We have to get through the agenda and we do it. And so it takes a lot of time. So when you see me Wednesday afternoon, sometimes mentally I'm drained, because we've been down some rabbit hole or doing something and discussing something. And it takes probably one day just to reacclimate yourself
Wow.
to be able to then focus on other things, and
Yeah.
especially right now with water. And thank the Lord that we've had some rain,
Mm.
and so
Some great amount of rain, I
yeah.
think. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's not enough to refill those lakes, but we thank God for anything and
Oh yeah,
everything we get.
they're going up. They're not
They're going
gonna.
up.
It
Mhm.
would take several episodes
Yeah.
to get
And we
back up
keep
to where
getting
it's
them.
at.
So I'm like, thank you, Jesus.
Yes.
Keep bringing it.
Yes.
A week apart was perfect for my ranch.
Yeah.
That grass is growing. I was having to go out to the ranch and burn cactus so the cows could eat, buying, bales of hay consistently, and it was just becoming a lot. And then the rain came. Now they got food to eat. I went out there today. They look healthy. They look good. I'm like, thank you, Jesus. Everything looks green. Just keep the water coming. But it was a very serious situation. So how does it affect now the water situation? I'm sure it's still an issue.
Oh, it's still an issue
Mhm.
because it's an issue on um, two sides. Number one, yes, if I got a message today that I think the lake is up to from
8%.
8% up to 12 now, I believe. I
Not bad.
believe. And Choke Canyon and then the lower Colorado and the Lavaca. I just forgot the name of the other. They're doing well.
Texarkana.
The Texarkana,
Mhm.
yes, it's doing well.
Mhm.
And so we're starting to see, and I've heard in terms of the velocity of the water that's moving through the river is doing well. So
Great.
there are all positive sites or
Mhm.
things that are going that should be in our favor. But at the other hand, we have to make sure that we do the right thing to prepare for the future so that we learn our lesson.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's been a big problem. When you take a look at council overall, going back in the last, 20 years plus, they've always kicked this can down the road in terms of water. Oh, we're going to get water. And we usually did. And so now when we didn't, it's been an issue. And so we have to, we diversified surface water, so we would get it from three or four different, the lower Colorado, Choke Canyon, Lake Corpus Christi. But now with groundwater, whether we use that water on a consistent basis or temporary, that's another source. When we look at the possibility of the Inner Harbor desal plant, that's another source. Maybe Harbor Island. I know that they just assigned the Nueces River Authority just assigned an engineering contract to that. And you look at what we're doing out at Ed Rochelle Foundation's property, so we're diversifying.
Mhm.
The possibility of Barney Davis,
Mhm.
all of those things. I mean, we have just the fact that when 2 years ago, we put 42% was the percentage of water going through the Mary Roads pipeline. We're up now to 72% and possibly going to move up to 90%. We've changed the pump configurations. And so it's allowed us to be able to pump more water and safely because those pipes are rated to be able to take 100 MGD.
What other cities are pulling from Lake Texarkana?
Besides us, I really couldn't tell you.
Because I'm surprised that thing hasn't run dry with so many people pulling on it.
No, because where they're at, their watershed, they get more rain than we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
2 hours away from here, you get all the water you ever need.
Yeah,
It seems like it rains daily. Don't
Yeah,
it?
Houston is not worried about, even though Houston does use the Evangeline aquifer, they get a lot of their groundwater from the Evangeline aquifer. That's a huge um, underground aquifer. It's
Mhm.
amazing how much it puts out. But yeah, they're not, they get water, they get rain.
Yeah. So I was thinking about the whole desal thing and the water issue and how it seems that Corpus Christi has a hard time making decisions. As a businessman and a leader, you know how decisiveness is very important and making decisions, being able to make them quickly. How do you think it's affected our city of Corpus Christi that they've just struggled to make decisions on a lot of things. I think the outlets. I could be wrong, but I think the outlets were supposed to be off of Crosstown somewhere south of Crosstown. I think there was a delay on the Whataburger field. It wasn't until after the Aviators showed success that it seemed like after that, Corpus Christi told the Ryans, go ahead and build Whataburger field. It seems like they delay a lot on. So I know Landry's, we lost Landry's, the little boardwalk that we're going to make, like at Kima, because they were just spinning their wheels. They wouldn't make a decision. Have you seen that there is a lack of decision making in the Corpus government?
I don't know if you want to compare Corpus Christi and their decision making with other cities that are like size. When I look at it, because I chair the downtown tours, so I chair the downtown tours. I've watched how much we've built up and grown the downtown area, and I use that as an example. The things that we bought there, the Bob Hall Pier, and not the Bob Hall Pier, but the other Cole Park Pier that's out there, and a lot of the things that we've added to the area. When you take a look at how much money we've spent in renovating downtown, bringing senior citizen affordable housing to the downtown area, we've done a lot of good things. We've had restaurants and businesses that have sustained the downtown area longer than historically they ever have. We've got a hotel that's going in, a new hotel downtown. We've refurbished 2 or 3 of the hotels. When you take a look at the Hotel Indigo, that is used to be Emerald Beach Hotel, there's a lot of good things. What we've done on North Beach, when I first came in the office in 2017, you couldn't walk down the street in North Beach without blushing, if you know what I mean. There were things that were going on there that just weren't appropriate. And at that time, I got with the chief of police and I said, this isn't acceptable. And so we cleaned that community up. We tore down a lot of the vacant houses and did a lot of different things. And so now when you take a look at North Beach and you look at the lighthouse and that whole establishment there, and you look at the renovation that we did with the hotel down there and the aquarium, and the things that we've done around the Lexington, and we put the little museum there in front to give the history of North Beach. Those are all very, very positive things. When you take a look, one of the things that I got criticized for is the water garden. The water garden was inoperable for, 4 or 5 years. I fought multiple times to get the water garden repaired. Sometimes when they first looked at it, city staff wanted to do it kind of just a Band-Aid. And so when you look at the history of how long the water garden, it was 30 years that it operated without having issues. That's a long period of time. So we procrastinated on the water garden. We had about, at one time they said maybe $700,000. We ended up spending maybe $2 to $3 million to get the water garden fixed. But I say all that because now the problem that we had before, the electrical system and the pump systems were in the ground, and we've changed that. That water garden is done right. We used a company that was based out of Canada that did the Bellagio and did water fountains in Las Vegas. They knew what they were doing. They fixed that. The water garden is the most photographed feature in the entire South Texas. It's photographed more than the Lexington. It's photographed more than the aquarium. It is the #1 photographed spot in all of South Texas by far. And to me, when somebody new comes into our town and they see this water fountain that doesn't work, it speaks bad to the city. It makes us look bad. And so now that water fountain is in great shape. We've got a lawn there. You can do concerts. You can do all the different things. And it should last anywhere from 30 to 50 years.
That's good.
Easy.
That's good. When it comes to bringing projects to Corpus, does everything have to go to a vote, or could you guys just make a decision? Like, does it have to be presented to the public for a vote?
No, not to the public. So it doesn't have to be presented to the public. There are certain things, bonds. So if you're going to raise money through a bond, then you have to be able to get the voters to approve that. But right now, when I first came on council, anything over $50,000, the city manager had to bring the council to vote on. Now he's up to $100,000 that he can approve, or city staff can approve. But they have to go out and they have to do a request for proposals and that. One of the things I'm a big proponent on is local business, making sure that they get a shot to get awarded contracts. It just doesn't go to everybody in San Antonio, Houston, or Dallas or whatever. And so, but yes, the council is going to vote on it.
Good, because it feels like there was some projects like out there at the Faro. There was supposed to be some kind of community that went up there. And there were some other things that I felt like they were always bringing to a vote to the people. Like they were afraid to make decisions, and they were always letting the people. And I was like, when you do that, the people that are against it are the ones that show up to vote against it. So you're never going to get anything done. So why not just make a decision and vote on it as a board, and then move forward on that? Because I think there's been a lot of projects that we could have had, but that didn't get done.
A lot of that just has to do with the developers. So if you look at Barisi Village, that's supposed to be out there in the Faro Valley with the old section, we cleared the path and gave that particular developer a TERS for themselves. So that means the city was going to put money in, and that developer has basically put the brakes on it. Maybe their financing fell through or whatever the case is. So a lot of times there's issues with the developer. Okay. And so I'm always like, okay, well, there was a 96 acres that's right there behind the movie theater over there by the International Pancake, Fuddruckers, that whole,
yes, sir.
that interchange right there by Crosstown. And we voted to let this individual do a project there, 90 acres, develop it for residential and commercial. Wow. And they pulled out. They sold, so a lot of it has to do with the developers. One of the things that we do when we do our master plans is that we do that so the developers understand what is it we want as a city and how do you prioritize that. And so hopefully it attracts developers to come in and do the things that are going to help us grow the right way. Yeah.
Do you think that the majority of the public doesn't understand what you guys are doing as a council?
Absolutely. Like I said, most of the people, and even when it comes to water and it comes to a lot of issues, one of the things, and I'll give you a good example in the Inner Harbor, we have had what they call a far field study. We've had that model done several times. The TCQ did their own model. But because of a group of individuals that are saying that we're going to harm the harbor, then we continue to do things. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we get elected by the people. And I tell people all the time, I didn't ask for this team. The people voted this team in. And so basically, this is the team that they have based on what they voted in. And so voting is a very, very, it's a big responsibility, and you really should know your candidates and understand and be educated and try to make a decision. But a lot of times it doesn't happen. A lot of times people vote just on whatever and so this is, unfortunately, we get what the people vote on. I believe in that. It's the best system. We still have the best system out there when you compare us with other countries.
So the harbor, the desal in the harbor, Inner Harbor, you think it would have been safe?
Absolutely.
Because I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. There hasn't been one thing. You have the Corps of Engineers, you have the EPA, you have the TCEQ, you have our engineers that have looked at it, and everybody has basically said that it's safe. But you have others that make decisions for whatever their decisions are. Maybe they have an interest in another project in another area, whatever the case is. Maybe they just want to separate themselves from others because they think that, okay, I'm not going to agree so that I can show, the people that I stand on my own. I don't know a lot of the motivation behind that. But right now, one of the things I've always said, that if we were go out there and we put the Inner Harbor in place and there is an issue, then we would spend the money to take that pipeline and correct it. Right. And we've done that. We've done that with the Oso Bay. We've done that with different things that, out in my area, there's used to be cane beef, but it's now called STX. We're constantly monitoring them because, the type of work that they do as far as rendering with the animals, And if they drop anything waste into the river right there, it's an issue.
Mhm.
And so we're constantly monitoring those things.
Mhm.
We're not going to let somebody do something that is going to harm our drinking water or whatever.
Mhm.
And so, and matter of fact, desal for people, especially when it comes to plastics, the system itself is one of the few things that will eliminate the plastic in our drinking water, and that's what's important. I
Mhm.
mean, it's more important. Nobody wants to sit there and drink something that could cause cancer or cause
Right.
issues.
Right. Yeah, me observing the whole situation and people talking about the desal harming the bay and the harbor. I'm like, you're just taking water out of it. You are separating the salt. The salt's already there. You're just taking the water out of it. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking at it too simplistically, but I just didn't see how it would be an issue. But I said the same thing as you did. If there was an issue, then you create something else to fix it. You allow a company to come in that will correct this, and allow there to be more business.
Right. It's just like the example I gave on the water garden.
Hmm.
We had an issue. Parts were breaking down.
Hmm.
It's the same thing with the Hilliard Center. We've got a lot of work to do on that place to get it back up to where it needs to be.
Speaking of that, I hadn't thought about talking about that, but Thomas J. Henry had put a bid on that and wanted his name on it, but it didn't go to him. And I heard, maybe I'm wrong, but I heard that he was a higher bidder, and it still went to Hilliard. Is that correct, or did I miss something?
Well, I do believe that early on, when the Hilliards put their name in the ring, or
Hmm.
that Thomas J. Henry did continue to up his bid. Um, but I really believe that the decision that the OVG made overall, in terms of the businesses that were there currently, because there's a lot of corporate sponsors that have those corporate suites and all that,
Hmm.
or spend advertising dollars. At the end of the day, they thought overall it would be better to go with the people, the Hilliards that they went with, than Thomas J. Henry, and that was a decision that OVG made. They're the ones that manage it, and so financially, we felt that at the end of the day, we're going to be better off. At least that's what the OVG and the people that manage it and the city staff and I think that if you take a look at how well it's been ran and the things that are going on there and the interest that the Hilliard family has put into that, I think there is some truth to that. I don't know if I don't have nothing against Thomas J. Henry. I don't know if he would have done the same thing or not, but they certainly have done a good job.
Okay. Yeah, I was just interested. I was like, that's a lot more money that he was
Well,
offering.
but let's put it in perspective. When you looked at the American Bank Center, they basically paid about $300,000 a year. Now I think I could be wrong, but I think the package that the Hilliards put together was about 26 million.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought they were like 2 million.
No,
I
sir.
thought Thomas was the one that was up.
No,
Up
they
in the
were
20s.
both up there. They were both up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not too bad. That's good. Well, I hope the whole water situation gets figured out quickly, even though it's been raining, because some of those people that complain about the desal and the harbor were the same people that complain about there not being water for industry. And I'm like, you don't make sense, because you complain about there not being water for industry, but you don't want the means to be put in place to be able to bring water for industry. And they almost seem like they make enemies of the industry. And I don't understand, let's just say you stop giving water to the industry, you might have water, but then you don't have food on the table because they're providing jobs for everybody. So I'm just looking at that stuff. To me, some people just don't make sense. The ones that go up for public comment.
Right. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they have the right to freedom of speech, and they can say what they say.
Yeah, they can. So I wanted to touch on this because you have brought up God and your faith and stuff like that. Do you consider yourself a Christian man, or where is your faith at?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't, um, my success, again, I owe it to my Lord and Savior.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Yes,
You don't take a kid that was raised on his own basically after the age of 12 and be as successful as I have been without putting my faith and guidance in God and Jesus Christ.
Amen.
It just, you can't, it's not going to happen.
Amen.
And I'm very blessed. Tomorrow, if everything stopped, I've had a wonderful life, and I'm thankful every day for that life. And because, and at the same time, we have to understand that all this is great, but it's temporary.
Mm-hmm.
That there is definitely, at the end of the day, at least if you're a Christian, then you're looking at eternal life. And that's so important.
It's funny that some people would criticize and say, yeah, you're able to say that because you're a business owner and because everything's going well. So you're crediting your success to God. So it's easy to say that. But we just talked about you having gone through cancer and cancer treatment, and yet you're still able to sit here and say, God's been with me. God's blessed me. And I think that speaks highly, because a lot of people who go through situations like that become scornful. They become resentful, and maybe bitter against God. But you somehow have allowed it to perhaps even strengthen your faith.
Yes. But I think part of that also has to do is that the gift that God gave me by being a soldier and going into combat and putting my life on the line for this country, knowing that at any given point in time that my life could be over. Then once you deal with that and you deal with death, cancer is just another thing. And so that's very important, because I think one of the biggest lessons I learned when we were going to deploy, I used to look up to a lot of people. And it's funny when you know that you're going to go into combat, how so many people take that. I've had people get out of it. Many people that I thought were strong, big, physical leaders that were scared to death and got out of it. And my wife and I, we were together. We weren't married at that time, but we were in the same unit, and we went into combat together, and we shared that experience, and knowing that every day you're giving your life on the line. So at the end of the day, really, what's cancer? And I wouldn't take it back. I'd do it again. I'd do it again, because the fact that you have soldiers out there, people that are willing to sacrifice their lives for the good of this country, that's what makes America great. And that, to me, is what makes our country, the country that it is.
Wow. Well, praise God. I brought you on here to have the people learn a little bit more about you, but I've learned a lot about you. And I know we're B&I together, but there's no way to really learn somebody and get to know somebody as well as I just did in this hour, a little over an hour that we've spent together. But makes me glad that you're part of our city leadership, so it comforts me that there's somebody up there that of your capacity and your level of faith and just perspective, the way you look at things. It's brought me a lot of comfort, if you will, in my government, in our city government. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
No, I appreciate you, and I appreciate, I always think that pastors, you're on the front line too.
Yes, sir.
And so your mission is an important mission, and we're in the mission of helping save souls, and that's a wonderful thing.
We preach the word, we equip the saints, and then you guys go out there and go to battle. So we appreciate everything you guys do. And Councilman Everett Roy, thank you for joining me in the den.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.